At first glance, the BMW M4 F82 looks like everything people expect from a modern M car. Low, wide, aggressive, sharp, a long hood, a short rear, big arches, a serious front end, and the kind of stance that tells you this car was never built to be ordinary. But the F82 M4 was not just another fast BMW coupe. It was the beginning of a new chapter. Before this car, the name M3 Coupe carried decades of history. The E30, the E36, the E46, the E92. Each generation had its own personality, its own engine, its own place in BMW M history. But when the F82 arrived, BMW changed the rules. The coupe was no longer called the M3. It became the M4. And for some people, that name alone was enough to start an argument. Because this car did not just replace a model, it replaced an identity. It arrived after the naturally aspirated V8 M3. After one of the most emotional engines BMW had ever built. After an era when M cars were judged by sound, revs, and raw mechanical feeling. The F82 had to follow that. And instead of trying to copy the past, BMW did something different. They made it sharper, more modern, more aggressive, more digital, more powerful in the real world. This was the M car that pushed BMW into a new turbocharged era. And that is why the F82 matters. Not because everyone loved it immediately, but because it changed what an M car could be. This is not the sound of the old naturally aspirated M cars. This is the sound of a new era. The sound of the F82 M4 was always part of the debate. Some people missed the scream of the E92 V8. Some missed the rawness of the older inline-six engines. But the F82 had its own character, sharper, deeper, more aggressive under boost. It did not sound like the past. It sounded like BMW M entering a new world. Standing still, the F82 M4 has a very different energy from the older M cars. It does not feel soft. It does not feel subtle in the same way the E46 did. This car looks more aggressive from the beginning. The front bumper is sharper. The hood has more tension. The body looks wider. The rear looks stronger. The whole car feels like it was designed to be more serious, more modern, and more intimidating. And that was important. Because the F82 was not only replacing the M3 Coupe, it had to create a new identity for the M4 name. BMW gave it the look of a car that was moving even when parked. The carbon fiber roof, the muscular arches, the wide rear track, the low stance, every detail made the car feel more focused. It looked expensive but not soft, premium but not calm, modern but still connected to the M bloodline. And this is where the F82 starts to make sense. It was not designed to be a nostalgic car. It was designed to move BMW M forward. Some people wanted the old feeling back, but BMW was not trying to go backward. They were building a car for a different performance era, an era of torque, turbocharging, precision, grip, and speed that arrived much earlier than before. The F82 M4 was not the last old-school M car. It was the first of, but even with all the modern technology, this was still an M car. Rear-wheel drive, big torque, a sharp front end, and a chassis that could still break traction when the driver asked for it. This is the side of the F82 that people remember. Not the debate, not the criticism, the feeling. When the rear steps out, the M4 stops being a spec sheet. It becomes alive. And in that moment, the old M spirit is still there. On the road, the BMW M4 F82 immediately feels different from the car that came before it. The E92 M3 made you work for the power. You had to rev it. You had to chase the top end. You had to let the engine climb before it gave you everything. The F82 changed that feeling. Its S55 engine brought torque much earlier. A 3.0-litre twin-turbocharged inline-six. Compact, strong, responsive, and built for a different kind of speed. BMW M rated the standard F82 M4 at 431 horsepower, with later versions reaching even higher outputs. The generation marked the first M3 and M4 era, built around M twin-power turbo technology. That changed the personality of the car. The power did not feel far away anymore. It was always waiting, coming out of corners, on short straights, in the middle of the rev range, at speeds where older M cars would still be building toward their peak. The F82 felt more urgent, more explosive, more modern, and that made it faster in the real world. But it also made it more controversial, because BMW M had always been about more than speed. It was about feeling. And with the F82, the question became simple. Could a turbocharged M car still feel special? The F82 M4 was not a car everyone understood immediately. Some people said it was too aggressive. Some said it had too much torque. Some said the sound was not emotional enough. Some missed the old engines. And in a way, they were right. The F82 did not feel like an E46. It did not feel like an E92. It did not try to. It was a different machine. The steering was more modern. The power delivery was stronger. The rear axle could feel more alive. The car demanded more respect than some people expected. This was not a soft transition into the turbo era. It was a hard one. BMW M did not gently introduce the future. They gave the M4 a sharp personality. A car that could feel calm when cruising, and then suddenly become serious when the boost arrived. That made the F82 exciting, but it also made it demanding. You had to understand the car. You had to respect the torque. You had to remember that this was still rear-wheel drive. And that is part of why enthusiasts still talk about it. The F82 was not invisible. It had opinions. It had edges. It had a character that made people choose sides. And cars that divide people often become more interesting with time, because safe cars are forgotten. But controversial cars stay in the conversation. The BMW M4 F82 became one of those cars. The more you watch the F82 move, the more you understand what BMW was trying to build. This car was not only about the engine, it was about the full package. The body was wider and more aggressive than the regular 4 Series. The suspension was tuned for sharper response. The chassis was built to handle the extra torque. The carbon fiber roof helped lower weight and gave the car a serious M identity. And the whole machine felt more focused than a normal coupe could ever feel. This is what BMW M has always done best. Take a regular car and turn it into something with purpose. But the F82 did that in a new language. Older M cars often felt delicate. The F82 felt muscular. Older M cars often asked you to chase the red line. The F82 gave you power earlier. Older M cars felt more analog. The F82 felt more precise, more technical, more serious. And that difference is why it became important. Because every generation of M car reflects its time. The E46 reflected the early 2000s driver's car era. The E92 reflected the high-revving, naturally aspirated era. The F82 reflected the beginning of modern turbocharged performance. It was faster, stronger, sharper, more efficient, more advanced, but it was also heavier with expectation, because it carried the pressure of the M badge into a world that was changing, a world where emissions mattered more, where turbocharging became normal, where performance had to be delivered differently. The F82 M4 was BMW M adapting. And even if some people did not want that change, the change was coming anyway. The M4 was the car that made it real. As the light begins to fade, the F82 M4 starts to feel even more aggressive. The shape becomes darker. The headlights become sharper. The reflections stretch across the body. And suddenly, the car looks less like a performance coupe and more like a machine built for empty roads. This is where the F82's personality fits perfectly. It has a coldness to it, not in a bad way. More like precision. A sense that everything is tight, everything is ready, everything is waiting for the next input. The F82 is not romantic like the older M cars. It is not soft around the edges. It feels more serious, more focused, more dangerous. And maybe that is why it works so well at night. Because the car has a darker character. It does not feel playful all the time. It feels like it wants to attack the road. The turbocharged engine gives it strong acceleration. The chassis gives it confidence. The rear-wheel drive layout keeps it alive. And the M badge gives it pressure. Because every M car has to prove itself. Every generation is compared to the legends before it. And the F82 had some of the hardest comparisons of all. It had to follow the E92 V8. It had to carry the M3 Coupe spirit into a new name. It had to prove that the M4 badge deserved respect. That is a heavy responsibility. But over time, the F82 did something important. It built its own identity. Not as a copy of the past, but as the M car that changed the future. The F82 M4 was never perfect, and that is part of why it became memorable. Perfect cars can be impressive, but they are not always interesting. The F82 had flaws people could talk about: the sound, the traction, the sharp torque delivery, the feeling compared to older M cars. But those flaws gave it personality. It was not a car that disappeared into the background. It made people react. Some loved it immediately, some needed time, some never accepted it. But everyone understood that it was important, because this was the car that showed where BMW M was going. And now, years later, the F82 feels different. The debate around it feels less simple. People are starting to look at it not only as the car that replaced the old era, but as the car that created the new one. It was bold, it was aggressive, it was not afraid to be different. And for a performance car, that matters. Because legends are not always born from universal approval. Sometimes they are born from conflict. On a darker road, the F82 M4 feels like a car with two sides. One side is controlled, modern, precise. A car that can cruise calmly and feel almost easy. But the other side is always there. The boost, the torque, the rear wheels, the sharp reactions. That is the side that reminds you this is still a true M car. Not because it sounds like the old ones, not because it feels exactly like the old ones, but because it still carries the same idea. Take a BMW Coupe and make it feel alive. The F82 did that in its own way, a new way, a turbocharged way, but still an M way. And this is where the F82 becomes more interesting than people expected. Because at first, many judged it only by what it was not. It was not naturally aspirated. It was not called an M3 Coupe. It did not scream like the E92. It did not feel as raw as the older generations. But that is only one side of the story. The other side is that the F82 brought BMW M into a new reality. A reality where performance cars had to be faster, stronger, more efficient, and more usable every day. And the M4 did all of that. It had the torque older M cars never had. It had the speed to compete with much more expensive machines. It had the aggressive design to make the new M4 name feel serious. And most importantly, it still had that feeling that the rear wheels mattered. That is something BMW M could not lose. Because no matter how modern the car became, the connection between power and the rear axle was still part of the character. The F82 could feel calm when driven gently, but when pushed, it could become sharp very quickly. That sudden change is what made it exciting. It was not always easy. It was not always forgiving, but it never felt boring. And maybe that is the point. A true M car should not feel invisible. It should make the driver pay attention. It should have a personality. It should feel like something more than a fast version of a normal BMW. The F82 had that. Even when people criticized it, they were still talking about it. And that means the car mattered. As the evening gets darker, the M4 starts to feel more serious. The road becomes quieter. The lights become sharper. And the car begins to show the side that made it different from the older M cars. This was not a romantic machine. It was not built around nostalgia. It was built around impact. The torque hits harder. The body feels wider. The whole car feels more aggressive, more direct, and more modern. And in moments like this, you stop comparing it to the past. You start to understand it for what it is. The first M4, the car that had to carry a new name. The car that had to prove turbocharging could belong in a real M car. The car that had to show BMW fans that change did not mean the end of character, because the F82 still had character. It was just a different kind. Not smooth and classic, not high-revving and emotional like the old engines, but tense, fast, sharp, a little dangerous, and completely focused. This was the new face of BMW M, and whether people loved it or hated it, they could not ignore it. Standing under evening light, the F82 M4 becomes easier to understand. It does not need to move to feel intense. The shape already tells the story. Wide arches, aggressive front end, low roofline, short rear deck, a body that looks more muscular than elegant. And that fits the car, because the F82 was not about subtle charm. It was about presence. It was about making the M4 name feel serious from the first generation. And that is not easy. When a new badge replaces a legendary identity, people resist it. The M3 Coupe name had history. The M4 had to earn its place. And the F82 was the car that had to do it. Every later M4 exists because this one opened the door. The G82, the competition models, the CS and CSL versions, the modern turbocharged M identity. They all stand on the foundation that the F82 helped create. That is why this car matters more than some people realize. It was not just another fast coupe, it was the first M4. And first chapters are important. As the road leads toward the city, the M4 starts to feel more civilized again. That is another part of its character. It can be aggressive on an open road, but it can also return to normal life. That dual personality has always been part of BMW M, a car you can drive every day, but also a car that feels special when the road opens. The F82 did not lose that, it just expressed it differently. More torque, more speed, more sharpness, more modern attitude. And as the city lights get closer, the car feels like a bridge between two worlds. The old BMW M behind it, the new BMW M ahead. In the city, the F82 M4 looks at home. It is still a BMW coupe, still usable, still clean enough to blend into traffic. But anyone who knows cars understands what it is. This was the first M4, the car that changed the badge, changed the engine philosophy, changed the sound, changed the way people talked about modern M cars. And that is why it became impossible to ignore. Some cars are loved because they continue a tradition. The F82 is interesting because it challenged one. It asked BMW fans a difficult question. Does an M car have to feel like the past to deserve the badge? Or can it become something new? The F82 was BMW's answer. By morning, the story feels different. The city wakes up, the road opens again, and the F82 M4 no longer feels like a controversial car from the past. It feels like the beginning of something, because time changes how we see cars. When the F82 arrived, people compared it to what came before. They talked about what it lost, the naturally aspirated sound, the old school feeling, the M3 Coupe name. And those things mattered. But with distance, you start to see what it gained. More torque, more real-world speed, a stronger platform, a new identity, a new chapter for BMW M. The F82 M4 was not trying to be the E46. It was not trying to be the E92. It was trying to be the M car of its own time. And that is why it deserves respect. Because every great car has to exist in the world it was born into. The F82 was born into a world of turbocharging, emissions rules, fast arrivals, and higher expectations. BMW M had to evolve. And evolution is never easy. Some people will always prefer the past. Some will always defend the future. But the F82 stands between them. A car that still had rear-wheel drive, still had a straight six, still had an aggressive coupe body, still had the M feeling, but delivered it through boost, torque, and modern engineering. That makes it one of the most important M cars of the modern era. Not because it was perfect, not because everyone agreed on it, but because it changed the direction of BMW M. And years later, that change feels bigger than ever. The BMW M4 F82 was the car that divided people, the car that started arguments, the car that replaced a legendary name. But it was also the car that proved the M badge could survive a new era. It was fast, sharp, aggressive, controversial, and impossible to ignore. And maybe that is exactly what a true M car should be. The BMW M4 F82 was not just the replacement for the M3 Coupe. It was the start of a new M generation. A turbocharged straight six, a new name, a sharper attitude. A car that challenged tradition and created its own legacy. Some M cars are remembered because everyone loved them. The F82 is remembered because it changed everything. The BMW M4 F82, the M car that changed BMW forever.